takes a minute.
Hi, everyone. Welcome to RbD's Workout Wednesdays, a weekly show designed to deliver bite-sized training sessions that equip and empower you with practical tools to unlock and unblock your path to success. Our show features industry experts from our other weekly show, Rev Shots. We're showcasing real-world tactics and strategies that work. Tune in to make your numbers, retain your team, and delight your customers. Follow me on LinkedIn or join our mailing list to stay updated on our latest speakers and episodes. Let's move forward together, one Wednesday at a time.
Hello, everybody. Happy Wednesday. We made it. And I'm Dion Major, your host of Workout Wednesday, as well as Rev Shots. And I'm super happy that we have Haley joining us again. And a couple of things. Workout Wednesday's purpose is to provide you with quick hits of training nuggets. Again, it's an extension of our show, Rev Shots. And we are giving you insight into what really, really smart people are doing, what really smart people are doing to take advantage of the other really smart people out there in a good way, and to be unapologetically successful. I think we all know we want training, we want help, we want coaching. Sometimes what stops us is, what does that look like? So this show is designed to give you a couple of things. Options of training that if you choose to do internally, fantastic, you should do that. But also exposure to people that are doing amazing things that you might actually need. And Haley is one of those amazing people. So Haley, thank you for joining us. Haley was also a speaker at our H2H Human Connections Done Right virtual summit last month in March. We'll make sure everybody has a link to her talk there. And she's also a member of the Revenue by Design executive group that meets monthly, and among other things. So Haley, thank you for joining today.
Thank you. I'm excited to be here.
Thank you. Tell us a little bit about you, your background, and how you got to where you are now.
Yeah, so I co-founded Code, which is a boutique leadership development firm, about 3.5 years ago now, after working internally at a startup for 5 years in what we called our human development department. And really, Code is super focused on how do we strengthen your leadership pipeline. So the folks below the C-suite, how do we actually give them the tools and the training and the support that they need to be successful in leadership? Because I think we've talked about most people go into leadership because they were great independent contributors and they're high achieving and they're motivated and all the other things. And now you're managing people and it's a completely different ballgame. And so that's really what Code is focused on.
Yeah, Haley, that's amazing. And there's some organizations out there that do a great job for their emerging leaders, and that's fantastic. So would you say your program and your approaches serves those companies as well, or is it more for organizations that might be growing that don't necessarily have, like you said, like human development, like a leadership development track per se internally, but know they really want to make sure that their emerging leaders are equipped and empowered and encouraged to be the very best they can?
Yeah, our bread and butter is really small to medium-sized organizations who, to your point, are growing or they want to be able to promote more internally. And they know this stuff is important, but they don't have a full-time person working on the stuff, the ins and outs of all this stuff. The curriculum development, all those things is not a small piece. So to be able to come in and know that we've been testing this curriculum for over 8 years, we know the tools that are important. And to me, most importantly, we know the methodology and how to teach it in a way that's really going to stick with people. So when the program is over, it's not just everyone's reverting back. Like there's a real focus on driving behavior change and making sure that people are integrating these things into their day-to-day. So by the time they finish the program, they are leading people in an entirely different way, and they have a lot more tools to be successful.
Yeah, I love that. And I love what you just said too, because a lot of the work that I do is on the system and like the people, process, and tech, like the holistic go-to-market piece. And exactly what you were saying is a lot of the resistance we see. I mean, as humans, we don't like change to begin with. But to your point, like a lot of times we need to really press into the behavioral component. And I think I don't know about you, but sometimes that's the piece that people just don't want to do. It's hard.
Well, in my experience, it's not even that people don't necessarily, most of the people I work with, they like crave the direction. They want to show up differently. Like they know that there is friction and they're frustrated and there's stress and pressure and all the other things, and it's not working the way they want it to work, but they just don't know what to do differently. And we're learning by trial and error, which some people can get there by trial and error, or maybe you're lucky enough that you happen to have a mentor. But that stuff is not scalable and you do a lot of damage in the process. And so our whole thought process is let's like reduce the learning curve and give people the resources on the front end and reduce all the damage or most of the damage so they can be successful right away. And again, you're making the team more effective. You're making everybody on the team as individuals more effective, and you're taking a lot of the noise out of the equation.
Yeah. I just think a lot of what you're saying speaks volumes to what people are trying to accomplish at the end of the day. And again, sometimes there's that as a leader, sometimes it's, I don't want to give too much direction because I feel like I'm micromanaging. But to your point, that's the gap is people are craving direction. Yeah. And when it's given the right way, it produces these amazing results, right?
100%. And there's so much of, again, we're working with managers who are trying to figure it out for the first time. And I think that's a big question mark that they have is like, how much direction versus like hands off, and what's the approach that I should be taking? And there's questions that we can ask and ways that we can think about these things to come up with an answer that makes sense, and tools that we need to add to their toolkit so that they have them as options, right? So there's a lot of like complexity that goes into like solving for those problems, but those are the exact kinds of situations that managers are coming to us and saying like, I don't know how to deal with this situation. Yeah. And without a place to go for answers, what's happening in most organizations is, again, people are just trying random things or they're not doing anything. They're going home frustrated, usually on both ends of the equation, the employee and the manager, right? And things don't actually get resolved as quickly. And so when you think about what's the ROI of this kind of training, I mean, we can talk about retention and all of those things, but like you just think about the time and energy people spend being stressed out and not knowing how to motivate their people or give feedback to their people or address whatever the tough thing to address is. That's when you start to get a ton of benefit and you're putting a little bit more oil in the machine.
Yeah, I love that. And we're going to get to sharing what you have to share in just a second. So I'm curious to hear your thoughts on this, right? So God bless all the studies that are out there, and there's so many, and it's good, right? I think I like that because it's good, but I think you have to pressure test it. But what you just said too, I think it rings true where there's a study from Gallup out there that talks about only 23% of our employees are engaged. 77 aren't. 77% of our team is disengaged. Then you think about the study from McKinsey and others that say the cost of a disengaged employee is 40% of that employee's salary. That is a math problem that is totally fixable. And so I think that puts some of the numbers to the qualitative effect that we're solving.
100%. And again, it's like when you have a group, what I love, we do everything in like cohorts. You put your team together to go through this. And when you talk about that team engagement, like so much, and even learning, like so much of it is this snowball effect where you show up with your team every single week, you're learning new skills, you're solving problems together, and you start to get excited because it's like, oh, now we're all using the same language. We have these tools.
Yes.
My favorite thing is when people come to me and they're like, we had this issue and we huddled about it and we used the tools and we tackled it together and it was way more effective and it used way less of our time. And those people are so much more excited. They come to our classes every week and they're like excited to share how they solve the problem on their own. And it's like, now that's a completely different energy in the building.
Yes. And that cannot be understated at all. So let's dive in a little bit of what this looks like as well.
Totally.
So share with us.
I wanted to share, I was guest lecturing at USC 2 nights ago. And one of the questions that the student asked was like, what's the biggest mistake that managers make? And I always tell people, I'm like, nobody wants a perfect manager. No one's expecting for you to be perfect, but we really crave working with people who are self-aware. And if I'm self-aware and I understand I could have done that differently, or like I understand that maybe the impact of what the impact of this decision was, and I'm able to show with some humility and some accountability, that's a much easier person to work with, especially as from a manager perspective. Like, you get so much more respect from your team when you have that level of humility. And I think a lot of new managers sometimes feel like they have to put up armor and like pretend like they have all the answers and they know what they're doing all the time. And it's like, it's okay to also just admit that you're learning and we're figuring this stuff out and you don't have all the answers. But so to answer that question, like a big part of what we do is the self-awareness building. It's like, let's figure out our own stuff too. We're gonna teach you how to give feedback and how to coach people, and the team dynamics tools. Like, those are super important. We cover all of that stuff. But if we don't understand how we react under stress and pressure and what that looks like and the impact that it has on other people and all of those elements, then we're not going to keep growing as a manager. And it's a lot easier as an employee to want to lean in and grow and change yourself when you see that person that's leading your team doing the exact same thing.
Right.
So much of the self-awareness stuff that we work on it comes back to this development formula that we put together after years of doing this type of training with folks and taking a step back and saying, of the people who just keep leveling up versus the ones who have kind of plateaued, what are they doing differently? And we kind of reverse engineered this. And so a lot of the tools that we train, especially in the awareness component, are linked directly to this formula. But the first step is like, we got to start to build that self-awareness. And the second step is, once I recognize that thing about myself, like, that's only step one. Now I have to figure out how I'm going to show up differently. If it's something that's maybe not helping me get better, right? And so when people, Tasha Eurich did some great research on self-awareness, and I think she says like 90 to 95% of people identify as being self-aware, and in reality, 10 to 15% of us are actually self-aware. And so there's this big delta, which I always take that to mean like we all have some work to do. Like, we're not all perfect. There is a gap. And it's what we're doing in the program is not only starting to close that gap, but what are the tools and habits that we need to put in place and do little bits at a time over time to continually close that gap, right? It's about this continuous development. And so not only are you going to learn about yourself over the course of the program, but you're going to be equipped to continue to do this process over and over and over again. I always think about it like brushing your teeth. We don't like brush our teeth really hard once a month. We do it, 4 or 5 minutes a day, every single day. And so that's what I think about from a development standpoint, is it doesn't have to be like, one thing that we focus on like once a year, really, like when we spend a ton of time on it and then we forget about it the rest. Like, we're going to make a lot more progress if we do these things incrementally. So all that to say, what we figured out leads people to kind of build that self-awareness is, one, are we doing reflection on a consistent basis? I'm a really big proponent of weekly rhythms. I think that tends to be consistent enough that we're always kind of thinking about it, but it's not overly onerous. And I want all these things to be realistic. There's great research that if your employees spend 5 to 10 minutes a week doing reflection, they're going to be more effective employees. You're going to actually like gain money from that effectively. They're going to be that much more productive, because we need to spend the time not only just doing the things, but thinking about what we just did and holding the tension on, is there something that we could have done better or differently? So that's piece number one, is, are we doing consistent reflection? Piece number two, from a self-awareness perspective, is, are we going out and are we getting feedback? There's a lot of people who are great at receiving feedback, and we need to be good at receiving feedback, but also, are you actively going out and asking for it? Like, I always tell people, like, who are those 2 or 3 people that you trust implicitly, that know you kind of inside out, that you can go to, and they're going to be honest with you about like what's working and what's not working, and where you could improve. So you're going to get that feedback on a regular basis. And then the work component is like, how much work are you putting into those things, right? Again, we talk about these regular habits. if I'm doing a reflection exercise on January 1st every year, it's like, that's not hurting anybody. But if that's all I'm doing, it's probably going to be a pretty slow process, right? If I'm only getting feedback at my annual performance review, that's probably going to be a pretty slow growth curve. And so the work element is really how much work are we putting into those habits? And then the important piece is it's like all over top of our ego, because if we're not aware of our ego, it can undermine all of the other pieces, right? If we're not aware, and again, our ego is like when we feel like we need to protect ourselves, right? When we start to feel defensive. So when we can recognize what that looks like when we're falling into that like fixed mindset, right? It can help us to pivot. So because if I'm in my ego and I'm reflecting, am I really going to be honest with myself and hold myself accountable, or am I going to kind of be making excuses for myself, right? If I'm in my ego and someone's giving me feedback, am I really hearing the feedback? And so we have to start to understand where does our ego kind of rear its head? And oftentimes it's when we're doing something new for the first time, or when maybe we've on the other side of the spectrum, when we've done something the same way forever and we feel like we're an expert in it, and we start to become more closed-minded to other ways of doing things. So those are like the types of habits that we want to build that will give us those mini breakthroughs. And then it's about taking that information and deciding, well, what am I going to do about it? And what I always tell people when it comes to the deliberate practice piece, and if you want to like expedite your growth, is tell the people around you what you're working on so that they can hold you accountable too. Because if the only person holding us accountable is ourselves, it's so much easier to forget about things or, loosen the tension on it. And if the people around us know, hey, the 2.0 version of myself looks like this, and this is the specific thing that I'm working on, and I give you permission to call me out if you see me kind of doing that old thing again, it makes it really easy for your team to help you get better. And you're also just going to be more cognizant of it. So that's really the process that we teach people who go through our programs. Like, how do you build these habits so that the development is happening consistently over time?
Yeah.
That was a lot.
Oh, no. I thought you broke it down really well, right? Because you can't have step 2 without step 1. And I think a lot of what you're talking about, Haley, is the constant steady pressure of getting better.
Yeah.
Because it's easy to backslide, and it comes with knowing ourselves.
100%. If you look at the research on adult development, one, it's not guaranteed. It's absolutely possible that we are fully capable of continuing to develop ourselves over the course of our lifetime, right? But it's not a guarantee. It's not if I make it to 100, I'm going to be like the most enlightened version of myself. Like it doesn't happen by accident. But if you actually look at the research, a lot of people end up having these big developmental moments when something like kind of tragic or big happens, and it like forces this whole perspective shift. And I'm very much of the opinion that I would rather do, again, like little bits consistently over time instead of just passively going through my life, like, I don't know, speed racing through everything. And then all of a sudden I kind of get like knocked over by something that I wasn't expecting.
100%.
So it's like, it's how do you really get people to buy into that process? And again, like we brush our teeth every day. We don't even think about it. It's like there are little things that we can do that is going to make that possible. And it's not crazy. And I think a lot of people get freaked out because it's like self-awareness. It's this like nebulous, like big idea. Yeah. And we can make it really tangible and practical.
Yeah. Yes. I couldn't agree more. I've heard this phrase that says, we're not responsible for other people's feelings. Yay. But we are responsible for the impact of our words. And that means we have to choose our words carefully.
100%.
You know what I mean? And that phrase, I think, embodies some of the self-awareness, at least in my opinion. But it's hard to do. You know what I mean? And I heard this too, where, maturity is being able to hear past the tone.
Mm-hmm.
And that's really hard because we live in such a knee-jerk reaction time.
Yep.
Where, can you believe so-and-so said whatever?
Yep. 100%. And that's the ego piece, right? And there's like a really interesting, if you look at the research on like wrong spotting, it's like we're wired when someone gives us feedback.
Yes.
There's all these different pieces that we're wired to try to like figure out all the reasons we can justify not paying attention. And sometimes it is literally just the person giving us the feedback, and we already have a story in our head about that person. And it doesn't matter what they say. I'm not really gonna. And being able to recognize that in ourselves is a big thing. It's like, okay, this person triggers me. Let me try to untangle all of that from what they said, and is there some truth in it? And again, that's not a casual process.
It's not.
No. And that's where like the reflection and the ego and all these pieces start to really come into play. And if you have tools and language to identify these things and practice them, it does become easier to wrap our arms around. But often, again, we just like, there's so much going on that we're just reacting to things all the time. And if we're always in reaction mode, we're never learning anything. And that's to me, if I think about what differentiates manager from like what we call elevators, like that's a huge differentiator, is the person that's able to take a step back and think really differently about challenging situations.
Yeah, I think that's beautifully said and couldn't agree more. And it's so easy. I did a post a long time ago where as a leader, we lose the luxury of reacting.
Yeah.
You know who gets to react? Children.
Yeah. Yes.
Not leaders, and so I get a little sarcastic, right? So, and I jokingly say, I feel like the whole world is acting like my 15-year-old daughter, where like at some point, we have to evolve out of this where, God bless what she's picking up now and what they're talking about in school. And Mom, I have anxiety, and I'm not discounting anxiety. I think everybody does, right? So for those of you listening who are like, Dion just offended me, we all have anxiety. And so the conversations, what I hear you saying is great. We have that first step of awareness of this is how I'm feeling.
Yeah.
What is that next evolution? How am I building my toolkit to combat that? Because great, I have anxiety, but you know what? I might be in a situation where I don't have the luxury of going to a quiet spot.
Yeah.
I might be trapped in an airplane. I might be at a conference. I might be in 1,000 different scenarios where the world can't adapt to me. I have to adapt to the world.
100%.
And I think that second piece is what's missing. Go ahead.
No, I like one of the main things, one of the first modules that we teach is mindfulness. And I always start with like, okay, let's talk about why we're talking about mindfulness in the context of business, because sometimes it can feel like a little woo-woo, but it's exactly what you're talking about, which is like, we need to not be reactive. You need to be able to create that space between the thing happening and deciding what you want to do. And you have to be mindful of even how you're feeling to be able to make that decision. 100%. And again, if there's anything that you want to develop, these practices that you want to put in place, if you want to show up differently, you have to be so tuned in to recognize what's happening and choose to do something differently. And the anxiety is so often comes from, it's what we're focusing on in that moment, right? You're focusing on a problem. That's what's going on. It's making you feel anxious. And if we can kind of recognize that like the anxiety is coming from what I'm focused on, can I pause and can I put my energy somewhere else? Again, simple in theory, a lot more difficult in practice. There's these little things that we want to do over time that's going to make it easier. And we're going to recognize those things in ourselves. But so this is the type of like development work that we're doing that allows managers to deal with all the stress and pressure and things that are thrown at them and personalities and this, that, and the other.
Yeah.
With a lot more grace and a lot like a creator mindset. And like when you can show up with a team with that space and that awareness and that kind of a mindset, it has this trickle down effect that is very, very important to recognize. Like when someone comes into the room and they're anxious and they're stressed out, everybody else feels anxious and stressed out. So that's also, half the battle right there.
It does. Our energy and attitude is contagious.
Yeah.
Not in a good way some days.
Yes.
Yeah. I know some days like I have a full head of steam and I was like, nope, mama is in go mode.
Yeah.
Nope, just like we're going to be super bottom line-ish, right? And other days, to your point, I love the fact that you're using the word grace too, because it's so easy to, not do that. So yeah. So talk a little bit about some of the qualitative and quantitative outcomes that your teams see and their businesses see.
I always love, my favorite thing is when people do the surveys at the end of the program. And the thing that always is the most heartwarming to me is everybody, over 97%, pretty much everybody says they feel more capable and more empowered as leaders when they're in tough situations. And just recognizing that was such a big gap for people when they come in, is like, you have these difficult situations and you don't feel empowered and you don't feel capable and you don't know where to turn. And to have people walk out and acknowledge for themselves, like, oh, like I've got this really robust toolkit and I know how to use it and I feel confident using it, is really exciting. Like, people feel more empowered about their own job and their career and what is possible for them. So that's always, like, from a quantitative perspective, that's always the most fun to see at the end of the program, is just that level of empowerment. What was the other part? Qualitative
and quantitative.
Qualitative. My favorite, the thing that is like most important to me, is when people, they start to realize that the stuff, like, it's helpful at work, of course, that's why we do it at work, but like it transcends work. This is how we're showing up all over the place. And when people come to me and they say, I talked to my daughter differently last night because of what we talked about in class, or I caught myself in a victim like mindset with my family and I was able to shift, and like dinner went so much better and we avoided the thing that 6 months ago we would have fallen into, whatever the back and forth was. It's like they start to realize that all of this reduces friction at work, but it reduces friction outside of work. And I think that's when people are like really the most proud of themselves and excited. And if you think about, as a CEO, giving your people access to these tools, you've not only made them better leaders, but like they're so indebted and appreciative of the fact that like you've made their whole life better. Like, this is something that has transcended work. And I don't think we often get that in a workplace. So just that whole notion is like the thing that really like makes me very happy.
Yeah, I agree with you on that too. I love that. That is fantastic. Haley, where can people find you?
Where can people find me? LinkedIn. You can find me at Haley Hansel on LinkedIn, at code.co on LinkedIn and Instagram, and www.code.co to learn more about our programs and all the stuff that we do.
Love it. Thank you so much for joining. Well, everybody, you got it from Haley, who's done this before a bunch of times, a wealth of experience. And that's also a requirement of coming on the Revenue by Design shows, or people that have been doing things for more than a year. Not that that's bad. We want that kind of repeatable, sustainable body of work that really speaks to the results we're seeing. So Haley, thank you. Thank you for doing the work you're doing.
Of course.
Absolutely. All right, everybody. We will see you next time for our Workout Wednesday, as well as this Friday for our Rev Shots show with David Stone from Citron Systems. Thanks, everybody.